Hello everyone. Today we're going to explore quadrilaterals. After looking at some of your quiz grades, I noticed that we could use some work with quadrilaterals. Most of you know that the prefix quad means four. So remember that a quadrilateral will have four sides. So it is a four-sided figure. Anything with four sides would be considered a quadrilateral. Get an example of one. There we go. There's a four-sided figure as best that I can draw freehand. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral. A parallelogram is a four-sided figure. To draw a parallelogram, opposite sides would be parallel to each other. I'm drawing this freehand, so I'm doing my best. But you can see that this side is parallel to this side. They're also congruent, and the top and the bottom are both parallel. These arrows are showing that they're parallel. The top and the bottom are congruent and parallel, and the two sides are congruent and parallel. We can also look at their angle measurements too. This angle will be equal to this angle. And this angle will be equal to this angle, or congruent, we can say. So that's a parallelogram, and a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. Next, let's look at a rectangle. A rectangle is a parallelogram, and it is also a quadrilateral. I'm going to do my best to make this rectangle. Okay, there's my rectangle. In a rectangle, we have four right angles. Therefore, I'm putting these little boxes in here. Okay, we have the top and the bottom are congruent, and they're also parallel to each other. And we have the two sides are congruent, and they're also parallel to each other. So a rectangle is a quadrilateral, and it's also a parallelogram. Next, we're going to look at a square. A square is also a rectangle. A square is also a parallelogram. A square is also a quadrilateral. And again, I'm drawing this as best I can. It's not perfect, but you get the idea. A square is special. All four sides are congruent, and we have four right angles. So a square can be a rectangle, but not all rectangles are squares. A square is always a parallelogram, but we can't call all parallelograms squares. And we can call all squares quadrilaterals. Next, let's look at a rhombus. A rhombus is when you take a square and you kind of tilt it a little. Hopefully we can get my rhombus looking okay. It's not the greatest rhombus here. Let me start again. Let me make my rhombus a little bit better. Let's try this again. I am drawing these freehand. Okay, as best that I can do this. Okay, now we have a rhombus. Rhombus, they don't need to have right angles anymore, but all the sides are still congruent. And this angle at the top here is going to be the same measurement as the angle at the bottom. And then the angles on the sides here, the left and the right, will be congruent to each other. So again, a rhombus is like a square that you kind of squish a little. All four sides are congruent, but no longer do we have right angles. Next, let's look at a trapezoid. A trapezoid has exactly one pair of parallel sides. So I'm going to make one kind of a trapezoid. There we go. Most trapezoids people think of look like this. And again, the top is parallel to the bottom. The top is parallel to the bottom, so it has one pair of parallel sides. We can even draw our trapezoid kind of sideways like this. And ignore my little squiggly lines here. Okay, so this is parallel to this. So all of these are examples of trapezoids. They have exactly one pair of parallel sides. Lastly, in my quadrilateral category, I'm going to look at kites. Yes, it's something that you fly outside, but it is also something that can look like this. A kite has two congruent sides up here and two congruent sides down here. Okay, also, when you have a kite, this angle is congruent to this angle. The other angles are not congruent. Okay, so a kite looks like what you would think of as a kite. Another thing that I would like to point out, which is very important, is that the sum of all the angles in a quadrilateral is 360. It doesn't matter the quadrilateral, they always add up to 360. Again, let's look at the square, for example. If we look at our square, each of these angles is 90 degrees. 90 times 4 is 360. Again, if we look up here at our rectangle, we have 4 right angles. 4 times 90 is 360. This is how I remember it. I pick an easy quadrilateral like a square or a rectangle that I know have 4 90-degree angles, and I go, okay, all quadrilaterals then will add up to 360. So for example, if I go over here and I look at our rhombus, if I tell you these angles, the yellow ones, look to be obtuse, I'm going to say that each of these angles is 100 degrees, and this is 100 degrees over here. So therefore, to find the measurement of the top and the bottom, I would take 360, I would take away the 100 and the 100, which would now leave me with 160, and then I have two angles now, this one and this one, that will add up to 160. So then I would take 160, cut that in half, and 160 divided by 2 is obviously 80 degrees. So therefore that guy would be 80, and this guy would be 80 degrees. Let's look at the parallelogram over there. Again, I'm going to tell you that this angle here is 110 degrees, and this angle over here would have to be 110 degrees. Let's see if we can find the yellow angles. Well, they obviously are acute, notice that. But again, what I would do is I would take 360, I would add 110 and 110, which is 220. I would do 360 minus 220, and that would give me the answer of 140. I would divide that by the two angles, and I would therefore get this guy is 70 degrees. Little degrees look a little messy there. And this guy is 70 degrees. So again, the sum of all the angles in a quadrilateral would be 360 degrees. Now my last one that I'll do an example with is my crazy little figure up here, this crazy little quadrilateral here. I am going to make up some numbers here and see if we can come up with the missing angle. I'm going to say that this angle here is 40 degrees. I'm going to say that this angle here is 150 degrees. And I'm going to say this one up here looks like it's 90 degrees. So I'm going to go with 90. How would I find this angle? Well, I would add those three together. So 150 plus 40 is 190, plus 90 is 200 and that would be 280, and then I would take 360 and I would subtract 280 use my calculator if need be, and I get 80 degrees. So our missing angle would be 80 degrees. Hopefully that helps. You might want to jot some of this down in a notebook so that you could refer back to it during tests and quizzes. Good luck.